This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Kia ora and welcome back to Money Made Simple, brought to you by Simplicity. Hey Jenny.
Hello, Liv.
So, what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about something you'd think we'd know a little bit about, and that is women and money. How we earn it, how we save it, how we invest it, how we spend it.
And the unique challenges and also, I reckon, opportunities that women face in Aotearoa.
Absolutely.
And why are we talking about it right now, though?
We're talking about it right now because last week it was International Women's Day. It is celebrated on the 8th of March every year, but it's looking at issues that are uniquely facing women around the world. And we know that one of those is consistently is the financial gap between men and women.
Yes. And so we thought, instead of just doing like a celebratory post on socials
like,
to
yay,
say,
women!
Yeah, exactly. We thought we'd try and maybe give a little bit of value about how women can tackle this issue.
We'll look at some of the issues and then we'll look at some of the things that we can do to start to close that gap.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's start with some quick facts. Like, where are we at the moment?
Yes. While the gender pay gap is getting smaller, there is still one. And so at the moment, women on average earn 8.2% less than men do.
That's
so
right now.
Yeah, exactly. So what does that mean?
Well, if you think of it in simple dollar terms, I'm going to have to do some quick maths here. For every dollar that a man makes in New Zealand, a woman makes 91 cents, 91.5?
91.8.
91. Oh my goodness. You don't come here for the maths. You
No,
come here for
Jenny
the lols.
doesn't come here for the maths. Yes. But that is decreasing, as I've said, right?
It is. So quite fast recently, actually. So back in 2008, it was at 15%.
Yeah, right.
And so it's come down.
Halved in that
Yes,
time.
but it's still a significant gap.
Yes, and more significant for some groups of women, right?
Yes, so there are groups of women within New Zealand, such as Māori and Pacifica women and women with disabilities, that are further disadvantaged. So they're making less. The gap is bigger.
Yeah, and there are reasons for that, but we won't go into it because we are not actually experienced.
But I think we need to acknowledge that there is an issue, and I think mostly the experiences of women are shared. So lots of the things that we're going to talk about impact all women.
Even if it impacts some groups of women more, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And are we bad as New Zealand, as a country versus others?
No, globally, the gender pay gap is between 16 and 20% on average around the world. So, yeah, we're doing better, but there's progress to be made here as well as overseas.
I always hate when people say things like, oh, New Zealand's more clean and green, so there's no point of needing to recycle because China's much worse.
Yeah,
or
so our
whatever.
gender pay gap's smaller, so let's just not worry about it anymore.
Yeah, just because something's a less of a problem doesn't mean that you shouldn't tackle that problem. Let's dig into the main, I guess, underlying reasons behind these stats that we've talked about, the gender pay gap, and why women are proven to be behind financially than men on average.
Yeah. Well, the key one is that we don't have a linear career progression traditionally like men have. So we take career breaks. We go out of paid work when we have children, and often for longer when we're raising our kids.
Your kids don't stop needing to be looked after, right?
No, exactly. And you've got school and daycare and things to juggle, so you may go back part-time. This can actually take a big chunk of your working life, like 10, 15 years, where you are not at max earning capacity.
And that max earning capacity thing has a flow-on effect on your savings, right?
Exactly. So you're not earning any income at the time, but then you're also not saving money for the long term. So you may not be contributing to KiwiSaver, for example, and that's going to have an impact further down the track.
Yes. So your KiwiSaver balances is one of the things that is actually more of a difference than the gender pay gap, right?
Yeah.
Women in New Zealand tend to retire with around 20 to 30% less in their KiwiSaver balances.
Yet they're likely to live longer too. So they have to make that smaller amount of money last longer.
Stretch, yeah. Isn't that awful? There was recent FSC research that showed that KiwiSaver gap is actually increasing rather than decreasing. So while the gender pay gap is decreasing and we're on the right track-ish, the KiwiSaver gender gap has actually got worse. So.
That's worrying trend.
Yes. Let's move on for now.
Another one, so we're looking at career breaks being kind of the number one thing. Another one is the confidence gap. So even when we're working, we are not getting the higher paid roles or positions.
Yeah, and especially with what relates to like KiwiSaver and investment funds, women actually hesitate to start investing more. There's this confidence issue that they think that they need to know everything before they begin. They don't feel like they can start that fund because they're not sure exactly how it works. Whereas men tend to, and this is a generalisation.
These are all generalisations.
Yeah, exactly. Tend to be a little bit more like, I'll just see what happens. And that obviously applies, like what you've just talked about, to the workplace as well. It's been proven or shown in New Zealand, and I'm sure around the world, that women don't feel as confident going for a job unless they tick every single requirement on the job ad. So there was some research done by Seek New Zealand showing that 32% of women report that they are unlikely to apply for a job without meeting all criteria versus 20% of men.
Okay. So it's not a huge gap, but it is.
I think it is a huge
gap. A gap.
If you think about 20% and then 32%, it's almost 150% more.
Yeah. Oh, okay. See, this is why
I'm the mather. Yeah.
So, and again, this has a compounding effect, because if you're not stretching yourself and going for that job that stretches your ability, then the next job you go for won't be as high as it could have been.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So your career can progress slower, therefore your salary may progress
Well, even in
slower.
those conversations, part of that Seek research show that women don't negotiate as hard on pay when they're already in a job, and in interviews they're not as confident. So it makes sense that there are a lot more men in higher paying jobs than there are women, which feeds into the gender pay gap, right?
Yeah.
So
okay, so
quite an issue.
confidence across the board, whether it's with money and investing or whether it's applying for jobs, negotiating salaries, that kind of thing, that's a real issue. The other one is that there is just built-in discrimination and bias in the world.
Yes, a controversial one, we know.
Yeah, and I don't think that's something that we're experts and we can talk too much about, but there are industries and types of jobs that are still heavily dominated by men, that are quite well paid, that there are still a lot of barriers for entry for women.
Yes, I think financial services is a big one. You know, you tend to get more women in the likes of marketing, like us.
Marketing and comms?
Yep, HR, investor services, and then you tend to have very male-dominant teams in investing and operations, which are the higher paying roles, right? A boss in a past job, he was the CEO, having a really interesting conversation around engineering, which is generally a well-paid job. And he told me that women don't tend to suit engineering. That's why we didn't have any women across the 100 or so engineers that we had.
In what way don't women suit it?
They just don't suit that kind of work, mate. Come on.
Of course. What's interesting too is in lots of industries like that, there are more and more women going in to study these subjects, but they don't progress as far in the field. So they might do really well at university, but because of aforementioned barriers, family responsibilities and things, they don't tend
and discrimination and confidence, all of those things work together. They're not in isolation.
We are doing this because it was International Women's Day. So I reckon it's really important that we focus on some actionable steps for people that are listening to us. There's some things that are really hard to change, but there are some things that each of us can start to move the dial on. So let's talk about some of those.
Yeah, our favourite topic, tips and tricks.
Yeah.
So I think number one, most important, and something that we can change ourselves as individuals, is knowing your worth. And that includes negotiating your salary. That includes going for jobs that you think you might not be 100% qualified for. You might have seen on a lot of job ads that they have the little caveat down the bottom to say that women are proven not to go for as high jobs. So go for it. The men will, and you're going to miss out if you don't go for it.
Chuck your hat in the ring.
Exactly. You've got to be in it to win it. So, I mean, if you are, going for a high paid job or able to negotiate, it could mean hundreds of thousands in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. Another one, and it's another one of our favourites that we talk about a lot, is KiwiSaver. It is such a great way to start investing and learn more about investing. It's a highly regulated, sort of controlled scheme designed for the long term. So you're not in it to make a quick buck, which means that you can really settle in and
have that long-term view, which is what investing should be all about, right? Consider you have control of your fund type, your contribution rates, and the provider that you go with, and the regulations have made it really easy for people to switch between KiwiSaver providers. It usually takes about 5 minutes. So really easy to look at what you want and switch between if you feel like one provider no longer suits your needs and wants. You're not stuck.
It's pretty easy to make progress quite quickly because you're not contributing to it by yourself. If you're an employed work, then your employer will also be contributing to your KiwiSaver. You'll hopefully be getting the government contribution as well. So you'll start to see progress quite quickly.
Yeah, I think that employer contribution, if it is on top of your salary, then it's that employer match. If it's 3%, that's 100% ROI to start with.
Straight away.
Before you get into KiwiSaver returns.
Yeah.
And then the government contribution, caveat, not everyone is eligible, that's then an extra $521.43.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. A year, just for making sure that you have contributed at least $1,048, and then returns of your fund on top of that.
In case anyone doesn't know what ROI is, return on investment, right from the beginning. But KiwiSaver actually also had some built-in bias at the beginning in terms of not thinking about what happens when women go out of work. So when you're on maternity leave, it was the case that unless you could afford to make contributions, you weren't able to get the government contribution, and employers generally weren't contributing as well. The policies are starting to change, and I think that it's been recognised now that that is not good for the whole of the country. So yeah, I think we'll see more policies that will change. And also, I talked to Jane Wrightson from the Retirement Commission a little while ago, and she was talking about women traditionally not taking as many risks as well. So be really cognizant of the fund type that you're in and why you're in that fund type. She admitted that she'd always been in a balanced fund.
Ooh.
Yeah, which I gave her a little challenge on. If you are in a KiwiSaver scheme for 10 or more years, then you might want to think about whether you want a growth or high growth fund. You have to be comfortable with the risk. But yeah, traditionally women have taken a less risky approach, but that doesn't always benefit us in the long run.
No,
so that's just something.
Less opportunity for the higher compounding growth. Yep.
But I think KiwiSaver is like a gateway investment, right? So the other thing that women can do once you've got your KiwiSaver set up is start investing
outside of your KiwiSaver.
Yeah.
So your KiwiSaver is an investment.
Yeah.
That's something that I think is important to acknowledge. But then, once you feel comfortable, and even maybe before you feel comfortable, like we've just talked about,
push the boat out.
And it doesn't matter how little that is. It could be $20 a week. If you can work out how you can carve out $20 a week. But I think the most important thing is start today. Like, don't think, okay, once I have enough money or once I know more. There's that famous saying, the best time was yesterday, probably like 10 years ago.
The next best time
is today, given that that's all you have. So, like, don't just think about it and think, no, I need to do that, but later. I think that's maybe a bit of a classic Jenny.
I think this is somewhere where there has been real change lately for women specifically. I imagine 20, 30 years ago, investing was a bit of an old boys club. You would have needed a certain amount of money.
Broker.
You would have needed a broker. You would have needed the lingo. But now there are so many different ways to invest. You can invest completely online. You can do all of your own research. You can invest in managed funds where you're trusting that the experts have put a fund together and understand that rather than picking individual shares. So I think some of the barriers to women investing have come down.
I think another really interesting fact is that multiple studies have actually shown that women, on average, make for better investors than men.
Despite the lack of kind of institutional experience and things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there are multiple global studies that back this up. Fidelity Investments, University of California at Berkeley, BlackRock, Warwick Business School studies, they all show in various ways that when women do invest, they tend to outperform men on average.
And the cool thing about those studies is that they show that the reasons that women do outperform men is some of the cool strengths of women. So it's the fact that they're more patient, they do more research, they play the longer game. So we talked before about risk, and risk taking goes either way, but they are less the big risk takers, so they make really conscious, informed decisions in their investing, which pay off over time.
So not spontaneous decisions like my husband who got FOMO on getting into crypto 5 years after the trend started.
My brother did that too.
Yeah. So potentially less speculative assets, more well understood, well regulated, as you said, that long-term perspective. Yeah, cool. Another one would be, the reason we started the podcast is talk about money. So share your knowledge.
Ladies are pretty good at talking, but maybe not so much about the money.
No. So share or let the knowledge be shared with you. Bring it up, make money less of a taboo subject. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you're set up with, the more confident you can be, and the more you can actually get going and do it. Yep.
So that one affects every aspect of your financial life, doesn't it? If you're talking and learning wherever you can. So why don't we, because we love doing this, get a little bit personal about this then? We are both women and we both have money. What experience have you had that you think unique to women?
I don't think it's unique to women. I think it's unique to a lot of people in general, but it's worse for women. I feel like I didn't start investing early enough. So I got into the game in my early to mid-30s, doing kind of share trading and then buying property. And I just really wish that I'd started earlier. My dad actually encouraged me to get into investing earlier, and I
You're
thought,
like, boring.
Yeah, exactly. And I just imagine those compounding returns over the last, say, I think 6 or 7 years, and imagine that I'd done that 10 years earlier and how much wealthier I'd be now.
Yeah, do you think that's gender specific?
I think women probably start later. So I don't think it's, as I said, I don't think it's gender specific, but I think it's exacerbated for women because of that confidence. That I felt like I didn't know enough about finances and investing to do it. I hope that it's easier for younger women to do now because of the democratisation of the investing
world.
Investing platforms. But yeah, I think I was actually probably more male-like when I first started investing, if we're looking at real generalisations, and was very speculative and going for quick gains. So I'm not sure. Maybe a male wouldn't be as good at understanding their mistakes and
learning from them.
Exactly. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, we're gonna have to like slam a big, many generalizations in this podcast.
Like the boomer one. Yep.
Sticker on, eh? I feel like I'm a bit of a classic because wasn't very interested in money when I first started working. I've taken maternity leave twice, and in really different circumstances where I actually didn't get any maternity pay. One, I was overseas, and one, I'd been made redundant, so I wasn't eligible, and just opted out of KiwiSaver both those times. I also came back to work part-time for some of that period. I retrained and did some more study, and so I wasn't earning then. And I just wish that I had thought a little bit more about the longer term impact of some of those decisions. All I worried about was the now, and I didn't think that some of the decisions I was making were going to impact me for the long term.
I think that's a good learning to add to the actions you can take, is when you need to have career breaks, because that's a really common thing.
Yeah.
Think about the long-term impact, and if there's any slightly different decisions you can make in order to help mitigate those impacts.
And that might be making your KiwiSaver contribution from your parental pay so that you get the government top up, and that's going to keep things ticking along. It can be as simple as that. But yeah, a little bit of more thought. But that is the story of my life, Liv.
The good, the bad, and the Jenny, I think you wrote in our notes.
I did.
I really, really like.
We could call the podcast that.
We could.
Okay, so the really cool thing is, so the gender pay gap is shrinking slower than we would like, but it is. Some of the things that I think are going to change that are the increased opportunities for investing and just the empowerment of women. So there are so many more resources and tools designed specifically for us that are going to help the generations coming up make better decisions about money.
Let's roll through, and we'll put these in the show notes, just a couple of women-focused resources that we think are kick-ass.
So our fellow podcasters, The Curve, they are fantastic, and their website's got lots of great info.
Yeah. Girls That Invest, Simran Kerr, I think she's really great and very women-focused.
Yeah. Got to mention New Zealand's OG financial guru, Mary Holm.
Yes.
She's a great source of info.
Yeah. Frances Cook, who I think has Making Sense podcast. She also has different courses and blogs and resources.
Our very good friend Sarah Kelsey on the One Up project.
Yes, over in London now.
Yeah.
And of course, a little shout out to ourselves, obviously. Simplicity. Obviously, there's this podcast. We are women navigating our way. And then the Money Made Simple book that this podcast was inspired by, and a whole lot of blogs and resources online.
So there is just a wealth of information out there to try and build your knowledge and build the knowledge of the women in your life as well.
In a nutshell, women do have unique financial challenges, you know, being the main primary caregiver from my perspective, one of the main ones. But there's also big opportunities to change what has been the status quo and build wealth in smarter ways. And our brains are wired to be good at it.
Yeah. There is really no excuse there. When we do it really well.
And my biggest outtake, if you can take anything from this, is start now. So don't delay, whether that's upping your KiwiSaver contributions, making your first investment outside of KiwiSaver, or just talking more about money. There's one small thing that you can actually do today or this week.
Yeah. So do it.
Yeah.
Happy International Women's Day to you, Liv, and to all our listeners for last week.
Yes.
Ka kite anō.
Bye.
This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website simplicity.kiwi.